The stars looked cold and distant as Admiral Vexter stood on the bridge of his flagship. His ship was massive, bigger than most space stations. Around him, 200 other warships moved in perfect formation through the darkness of space. This was the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet, the most feared fighting force in the galaxy. For 300 years, no enemy had ever defeated them. They had conquered over 1,000 worlds. Entire civilizations had fallen before their power. The Council of Allied Worlds had tried to stop them many times, but they always failed. Now, most of the galaxy simply surrendered when they saw the Zephyrian ships coming. Admiral Vexter was proud of this record. His people were born warriors. They lived for conquest and battle. Their technology was the best in the galaxy. Their ships were faster and stronger than anything else among the stars. Their weapons could destroy entire cities with a single shot. Admiral, his second-in-command, spoke from behind him. "We are approaching the human colony system." Vexter turned around. His 4 eyes glowed with satisfaction. "Excellent. How many ships do they have defending the planet?" "None, sir. Our scouts report only civilian vessels and mining equipment." The Admiral laughed. It was a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge. "Humans, they are so weak. They spread across the galaxy like insects, but they have no real military power. This will be easy." The human colony on Kepler 442b was small. Only 50,000 people lived there. They had come to mine rare metals from the planet's mountains. The colony had been peaceful for 20 years. They had never hurt anyone. They just wanted to live quiet lives far from the big cities of Earth. But the Zephyrian Empire wanted their planet. The metals there were valuable. They would help build more warships and weapons. The humans would have to leave or die. It was that simple. Meanwhile, far away in another part of space, Captain Jake Morrison was having his morning coffee. He sat in his chair on the bridge of the USS Defiant, reading reports from Earth Command. The ship was quiet around him. Most of his crew were still sleeping. The USS Defiant looked like a simple exploration vessel. It was not very big compared to military ships. The hull was smooth and gray, with no obvious weapons. Most people who saw it would think it was just another scientific research ship, exploring new worlds and studying alien life. But Captain Morrison knew better. He knew what his ship really was. He knew what secrets it carried. The USS Defiant was not what it seemed to be. Morrison was 42 years old. He had been in Earth's Space Navy for 20 years. He had fought in 3 small wars and won medals for bravery. But he had never commanded a ship like this one before. Earth Command had given him special orders, orders that no one else could know about. "Captain," a voice called from the communication station. "We're getting a distress signal." Morrison looked up from his reports. "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was full of fear. It was a woman, speaking quickly. "This is Colony Administrator Janet Cole on Kepler 442b. We need help. A huge alien fleet just arrived in our system. They're demanding we surrender our planet. They say we have 48 hours to evacuate, or they'll destroy everything." The message was breaking up. The signal was weak and full of static. But Morrison could hear the terror in the woman's voice. She was trying to save her people, but she didn't know how. "They have 200 warships," the message continued. "We don't have any weapons. We're just miners and farmers. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help." Then the signal went dead. Morrison stared at the communication panel. His crew had all stopped what they were doing. They were looking at him, waiting for orders. 200 ships, said Commander Lisa Brooks, his second-in-command. She was a tall woman with short brown hair and serious eyes. "Captain, that sounds like the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet." Morrison nodded. He had heard of the Zephyrians. Everyone in the galaxy had. They were ruthless conquerors who showed no mercy to their enemies. They had destroyed entire civilizations just to prove their power. How far are we from Kepler 442b? Morrison asked. About 6 hours at maximum speed, Brooks replied. Morrison thought for a moment. He looked around at his crew. There were only 47 people on his ship. They were good people, brave and loyal. But they were facing an enemy fleet of 200 warships. Any normal captain would have called for backup. Any normal captain would have contacted Earth Command and asked for a battle fleet. But Morrison's orders were different. His orders were to test the USS Defiant's real capabilities. Set course for Kepler 442b, Morrison said quietly. Maximum speed. Sir, Brooks said, shouldn't we contact Earth Command first? We're just one ship against 200. Morrison smiled, but it was not a happy smile. Commander, do you trust me? Brooks nodded without hesitation. Of course, Captain. Then trust me now. Set the course. As the USS Defiant changed direction and began to accelerate, Morrison thought about his secret orders. Earth had been watching the galaxy for a long time. They had seen the Zephyrian Empire grow stronger and stronger. They had seen innocent worlds fall to alien conquest. The time for hiding was over. The time for Earth to show its true power had come not in the ship's engine room. Chief Engineer Karen Ross was making final checks on the experimental systems. She was one of only 5 people on the ship who knew the truth about what they were carrying. The USS Defiant was not just an exploration vessel. It was a weapon. A weapon designed to change the balance of power in the galaxy dot as the ship moved through space toward the threatened human colony. Morrison opened a secure channel to Earth Command. This is Captain Morrison. Operation Revelation is beginning. We are proceeding to engage the Zephyrian fleet. The reply came back immediately. Understood, Captain. You are authorized to use all necessary force. Show them what humanity can do. Morrison closed the channel and looked out at the stars. In 6 hours, the galaxy would learn that humans were not the weak, helpless species that everyone thought they were. In 6 hours, everything would change. The Zephyrian fleet hung in space like a cloud of metal death. 200 massive warships surrounded the small human colony planet. Their dark hulls blocked out the light from the system's star, casting huge shadows across the world below. Admiral Vexther stood on his command deck, watching the planet through the main viewing screen. He could see the tiny lights of human cities scattered across the surface. Soon, those lights would go dark forever. Admiral, his communications officer reported, the humans are trying to send messages to other systems. Should we block their transmissions? Vexther waved one of his 4 hands dismissively. Let them call for help. No one will come. No one in the galaxy is brave enough to face us. On the planet below, Colony Administrator Janet Cole was doing everything she could to save her people. She had sent distress signals to every human world she could reach, but the closest Earth military base was weeks away. Even if help was coming, it would arrive too late. The colony had no weapons. They had no warships. They were miners, farmers, teachers, and doctors. They had come to this world to build a new life, not to fight a war. Administrator, her assistant called from across the control room, we're getting responses to our distress calls. But none of them are good news. The nearest military help is 20 days away. Janet closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had 50,000 people depending on her. 50,000 men, women, and children who would die if she made the wrong choice. Keep sending the messages, she said. Someone has to hear us. Someone has to care. High above the planet, Admiral Vexther was preparing to make his final demand. He had done this many times before. He would give the humans one last chance to surrender peacefully. If they refused, He would destroy them all. Open a channel to the planet, he ordered. The transmission reached every communication device on the colony world. Every television, every radio, every computer screen showed the same image. Admiral Vexther's alien face, with its 4 glowing eyes and sharp teeth. "Humans of Kepler 442b, he began, his voice echoing through every building on the planet. "I am Admiral Vexther of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. You are now in territory claimed by the Zephyrian Empire." People all across the colony stopped what they were doing to listen. Parents held their children close. Workers put down their tools. Everyone was afraid. "You have 48 hours to evacuate this planet," Vexther continued. "Take only what you can carry. Leave everything else behind. Any human found on this world after the deadline will be destroyed." The transmission ended, leaving the colony in stunned silence. 48 hours was not enough time to evacuate 50,000 people. They had only a few small cargo ships. Most of the colonists would have to stay behind. But at the edge of the star system, something was happening. A single ship dropped out of hyperspace, moving fast toward the planet. It was small compared to the Zephyrian warships, but it was moving with purpose. The USS Defiant had arrived. "Contact detected," reported the Zephyrian sensor officer. "One ship, approaching from the outer system." Admiral Vexther looked at the display with interest. "What kind of ship?" "It appears to be a human exploration vessel. Very small. No significant weapons detected." Vexther laughed. "One ship? They sent one ship to face my entire fleet? These humans are even more foolish than I thought." On the USS Defiant, Captain Morrison was studying the tactical display. 200 enemy ships were spread out in a blockade formation around the planet. It was exactly what he had expected. "Danny," he called to his communications officer, "are you picking up their transmissions?" Danny Wright was a young man with quick fingers and a good ear for languages. He had been working on alien communications for years. "Yes, Captain. I'm translating now. It looks like they've given the colony 48 hours to surrender. Can you patch me through to their command ship?" "Yes, sir, but they'll be able to trace our signal. They'll know exactly where we are." Morrison smiled. "That's fine. I want them to know we're here." As the USS Defiant continued toward the planet, the Zephyrian fleet began to take notice. Sensors all across the alien fleet were tracking the small human ship. They were curious about why anyone would be brave enough or stupid enough to approach them. "Admiral," the sensor officer called, "the human ship is hailing us." Vexther was amused. "Really? They want to talk? This should be interesting. Put them through." The main screen flickered, and Captain Morrison's face appeared. He looked calm and confident, not at all like someone who was facing impossible odds. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Defiant. You are in human space, threatening human lives. I am ordering you to withdraw immediately." The bridge of the Zephyrian flagship went silent. Then, slowly, Admiral Vexther began to laugh. It started as a chuckle, then grew into a roar of amusement that echoed through the bridge. "You are ordering me?" Vexther said when he finally stopped laughing. "Captain Morrison, do you see my fleet? I have 200 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy. You have one small exploration vessel. Are you insane?" Morrison's expression didn't change. "I see your ships, Admiral. I'm not impressed. You have 60 seconds to begin withdrawing from this system, or I will remove you by force." This made Vexther laugh even harder. "By force?" "Captain, your little ship would be destroyed by a single shot from any one of my vessels. You cannot possibly threaten us." 50 seconds, Morrison said calmly. Around the bridge, the Zephyrian officers were also laughing. They had never heard anything so ridiculous. One human ship threatening their entire fleet? It was like a mouse threatening a pack of lions. "Captain Morrison," Vexter said, trying to sound serious, "I admire your courage, but you are being foolish. Surrender now, and I will let you watch as we take your colony. You can see how real warriors fight." 30 seconds, Morrison replied. On the USS Defiant, the crew was preparing for battle. They had trained for this moment for years. They knew their ship's capabilities, even if the enemy didn't. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Parker was at the weapons station, his hands moving over the controls. The ship's experimental systems were charging up, drawing power from the Revolutionary. New reactor in the engine room. 20 seconds, Morrison announced. Admiral Vexther's amusement was starting to turn to anger. "You are wasting my time, human. I have planets to conquer and civilizations to destroy. I don't have time for your foolish games." 10 seconds, Morrison said. "Fine," Vexther snarled. "You want to die with your colonists? So be it. All ships, target the human vessel. Destroy it." "Time's up," Morrison said quietly. The USS Defiant suddenly changed. Hidden panels slid open along its hull, revealing weapon systems that didn't appear on any galactic database. The ship's smooth gray surface began to glow with energy. Admiral Vexther stopped laughing. For the first time in his long career, he felt a small chill of uncertainty. "What is that ship?" he whispered. He was about to find out. Admiral Vexther stared at the screen, watching the human ship transform before his eyes. The USS Defiant no longer looked like a simple exploration vessel. Energy was flowing across its hull in patterns he had never seen before. Analysis. He arced to his science officer. The alien scientist worked frantically at his console. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy readings, but the patterns don't match anything in our database. This technology is completely unknown." Vexther felt a cold fear creeping into his heart. In 300 years of conquest, he had never encountered technology he couldn't understand. The Zephyrian Empire had always been ahead of everyone else. "Sir," his weapons officer called, "shall we fire?" Vexther hesitated for a moment. Something was wrong here. This didn't feel like any battle he had ever fought before. But his pride wouldn't let him show weakness. "All ships," he commanded, "prepare to fire. Target the human vessel." On the USS Defiant, Captain Morrison was speaking to his crew. His voice was calm and steady, even though they were facing impossible odds. "Everyone listen carefully," he said. "Over the ship's communication system, today we make history. Today we show the galaxy that humans are not helpless prey. We are not weak. We are not afraid." The crew listened in perfect silence. They had trained for this moment. They knew their captain had never lost a battle. "We have 47 people on this ship," Morrison continued. "They have 200 warships and tens of thousands of warriors. But we have something they don't have. We have human ingenuity. We have human courage. And we have weapons they can't even imagine." In the engine room, Chief Engineer Karine Ross was monitoring the experimental systems. The quantum displacement reactors were running at perfect efficiency. The phase shift weapons were fully charged. Everything was ready. "Chief," Morrison's voice came through the intercom. "How are we looking?" "All systems green, Captain," Karen replied. "The new technology is working perfectly. We're ready to show these aliens what Earth can do." On the bridge, Commander Lisa Brooks was watching the tactical display. The enemy ships were moving into attack formation. They were preparing to fire everything they had at the USS Defiant. "Captain," she said, "they're almost ready to shoot." Morrison nodded. "Good. Let them fire first. I want the galaxy to see who the real aggressors are." Lieutenant Commander Ryan Parker was at the weapons station, his hands resting on the controls. The ship's new quantum weapons were unlike anything that had ever been built. They could do things that other races thought were impossible. "Ryan," Morrison said, "are you ready?" "Ready, Captain." "Just give the word." Communications Officer Danny Wright was listening to the enemy transmissions. "Captain, they're coordinating their attack. All 200 ships are going to fire at once." Morrison smiled coldly. "Perfect. Steve, how long until they fire?" Tactical Officer Steve Collins was tracking the enemy weapons. 30 seconds, Captain." Morrison turned to address his crew one more time. "Everyone, this is it. In 30 seconds, we're going to show the galaxy what humans are really capable of. We're going to prove that Earth is not just another weak colony world." The seconds ticked by slowly. On the planet below, the human colonists were watching the sky, hoping for a miracle. They could see the alien ships preparing to fire. They could see their one hope, the USS Defiant, sitting alone against impossible odds. 20 seconds, Steve announced. Morrison took a deep breath. "Remember, everyone, we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every human colony in the galaxy. We're fighting for every world that has ever been threatened by bullies like these." 10 seconds, Steve said. Admiral Vexter was watching from his command deck. He felt confident again. One small ship, no matter how advanced, could not stand against his entire fleet. The humans were about to learn a harsh lesson about the reality of galactic power. 5 seconds, Steve counted down. Morrison's voice was steady and strong. "All hands, prepare for combat. 3. 2. They're firing. The space around the USS Defiant lit up like a star. 200 warships fired at once, sending enough energy to destroy a small moon. The beams of light converged on the human ship, creating an explosion that could be seen from the planet's surface. For a moment, everything was white light and energy. The colonists on the planet below thought their saviors had been destroyed. The Zephyrian fleet thought they had won another easy victory. But when the light faded, the USS Defiant was still there. It was surrounded by a shimmering energy field that had absorbed the entire attack. The ship itself was completely undamaged. Admiral Vexter's mouth fell open. "Impossible," he whispered. On the USS Defiant, Captain Morrison was smiling. "Our turn," he said. The human ship suddenly moved, accelerating to speeds that should have been impossible. It darted between the enemy vessels like a dancer, too fast for their weapons to track. "Ryan," Morrison said calmly, "you may fire when ready." The USS Defiant's quantum displacement cannons fired for the first time in combat. The beams didn't look like normal weapons. They seemed to bend space itself, creating ripples in reality that reached out toward the enemy ships. The first Zephyrian warship simply vanished. It didn't explode. It didn't break apart. It just stopped existing, as if it had never been there at all. The second ship suffered the same fate. Then the third, then the fourth. "What is happening?" Admiral Vexter screamed at his officers. "What? Are those weapons?" His science officer was staring at his instruments in terror. "Admiral, they're using some kind of molecular displacement technology. They're not destroying our ships. They're making them cease to exist." Lieutenant Amy Foster was coordinating the USS Defiant's targeting systems. She was a young woman with steady hands and perfect aim. She had trained for years to use these weapons. "Target acquired," she announced, firing. Another Zephyrian ship vanished into nothingness. The enemy fleet was beginning to panic. They had never seen anything like this before. Their most powerful weapons had no effect on the human ship. But the human weapons were erasing their vessels from existence. "All ships retreat," Admiral Vexter ordered. "Fall back to minimum safe distance." But it was too late. The USS Defiant was moving too fast. It was everywhere at once, striking targets with perfect precision. The Zephyrian fleet had trained to fight enemies that followed the normal rules of space combat. They didn't know how to fight an enemy that could ignore those rules. Morrison watched the battle unfold with satisfaction. This was what Earth had been preparing for. This was why they had developed the new technology in secret. The galaxy was full of bullies who thought they could push humans around because they seemed weak. Today, that illusion was ending. Captain, Commander Brooks reported, "We've eliminated 15 of their ships. The rest are trying to retreat." "Don't let them escape," Morrison replied. "We need to send a message that the galaxy will never forget. No one threatens human lives without consequences." The USS Defiant continued its deadly dance through the enemy fleet. Every few seconds, another Zephyrian warship would simply disappear. The aliens were learning that their 3 centuries of easy victories were over. The age of human weakness was ending. The age of human strength was about to begin. The USS Defiant moved through the Zephyrian fleet like a wolf among sheep. Every movement was precise and deadly. Every shot removed another enemy ship from existence. Admiral Vexter stood on his bridge, watching his mighty fleet being destroyed. Ships that had conquered 1,000 worlds were disappearing one by one. His officers were shouting reports, but he could barely hear them over the sound of his own fear. "Admiral!" His communications officer called. "The dreadnought crushing. Fist is gone. The battle cruiser Death's glory has vanished. Star Destroyer Flame of Conquest no longer exists." Each report was like a knife in Vexther's heart. These were not just ships. They were symbols of Zephyrian power. They carried the names of great victories. They had struck fear into the hearts of entire civilizations. Now they were being erased by a single human vessel. On the USS Defiant, Lieutenant Amy Foster was working with deadly efficiency. Her fingers danced across the targeting controls, selecting enemy ships with careful precision. She had trained for this moment her entire career. "Target locked," she announced, firing quantum displacement beam. Another massive Zephyrian warship simply ceased to exist. Where it had been, there was only empty space and scattered energy particles. Captain Morrison watched the battle with cold satisfaction. "How long have we been fighting, Steve?" Tactical Officer Steve Collins checked his chronometer. 2 minutes. "And 30 seconds, Captain. 2.5 minutes. In that time, they had destroyed over 60 enemy ships. The Zephyrian fleet was learning what it meant to face human military technology. Commander, Lisa Brooks was monitoring the enemy communications. "Captain, they're trying to coordinate a retreat, but they're too scattered. They can't form up properly." Morrison nodded. "Good. Keep them confused. Don't give them time to think." The USS Defiant accelerated again, moving faster than any ship in the galaxy should be able to move. The secret was the quantum drive system that Chief Engineer Karen Ross had helped design. It didn't just push the ship through space. It folded space around the ship, allowing it to appear anywhere it needed to be. "Captain," Ryan Parker called from the weapons station, "I'm detecting some of their larger ships trying to charge their main guns. They're planning something." Morrison studied the tactical display. The remaining Zephyrian vessels were forming a desperate defensive circle. They were going to try to concentrate all their firepower on the USS Defiant at once. "Let them try," Morrison said. "Amy, target their flagship. It's time to end this." Admiral Vexther saw the human ship turning toward his vessel. His 4 eyes went wide with terror. "All ships, protect the flagship. All weapons, fire at will." Dozens of energy beams lanced out toward the USS Defiant. But the human ship simply wasn't there anymore. It had moved faster than light, appearing on the other side of the fleet formation. "Impossible," Vexther breathed. "No ship can move that fast." But the USS Defiant was already firing. The quantum displacement beam struck the Zephyrian flagship's escort vessels. 3 dreadnoughts vanished in the space of a single second. On the planet below, the human colonists were watching the battle in amazement. They could see the flashes of light in the sky as the alien ships disappeared. They could see their single defender moving like lightning among the enemy fleet. "Are we winning?" asked a young girl, holding her mother's hand. Her mother could hardly believe what she was seeing. "Yes, sweetheart, I think we are." Colony Administrator Janet Cole was in her control center, monitoring the battle. She had called for help, but she had never expected help like this. One ship was destroying an entire fleet. It was like watching a myth come to life. "Administrator," her assistant said, "we're getting reports from all over the galaxy. Other worlds are detecting the energy signatures from this battle. Everyone is asking what's happening here." Janet smiled for the first time in days. "Tell them that humanity just announced itself to the galaxy." Back in space, the battle was entering its final phase. The Zephyrian fleet had been reduced to less than 50 ships. The survivors were scattered and afraid. Many were trying to flee, but the USS Defiant was too fast to escape. "Captain," Danny Wright reported, "I'm intercepting their transmissions. They're begging for mercy." Morrison's expression didn't change. "Did they show mercy to the civilizations they conquered? Did they show mercy to the worlds they destroyed?" "No, sir. Then they get the same mercy they gave others." "Continue the attack." Lieutenant Commander Ryan Parker was carefully managing the ship's weapon systems. The quantum displacement cannons were operating perfectly, but they required enormous amounts of energy. Even with the advanced reactors, they couldn't fire continuously forever. "Captain," he reported, "weapons are at 80% efficiency. We can keep this up for another hour if needed." Morrison nodded. "It won't take that long. Amy, finish them." The USS Defiant moved through the remnants of the Zephyrian fleet like a predator finishing wounded prey. Ship after ship vanished into quantum nothingness. The aliens had no defense against weapons that could literally erase matter from existence. Admiral Vexthera's flagship was one of the last ships remaining. He stood on his bridge, watching death approach. His proud fleet was gone. His mighty empire's reputation was shattered. In just 4 minutes, everything he had built was destroyed. "Admiral," his science officer said quietly, "should we surrender?" Vexther looked at the young officer. For 3 centuries, no Zephyrian had ever surrendered. It was against everything they believed in. But what was the alternative? Total destruction? "Open a channel to the human ship," he said finally. Captain Morrison's face appeared on the main screen. His expression was calm and professional, but his eyes were hard as steel. "I am Admiral Vexther," the alien leader said. I wish to discuss terms." Morrison studied the alien commander for a moment. "The terms are simple, Admiral. You will order your remaining ships to power down their weapons and surrender. You will release any prisoners you have taken. You will leave human space immediately and never return. And if I refuse?" Morrison's smile was cold. "Then in 30 seconds, you and your remaining ships will join the rest of your fleet in non-existence." Vexther looked around his bridge. His officers were staring at him, waiting for his decision. He had never backed down from a fight in his life, but he had never faced an enemy like this before. I accept your terms," he said quietly. "Wise choice," Morrison replied. "Steve, how long did this battle last?" 4 minutes and 12 seconds, Captain. 4 minutes. The most feared fleet in the galaxy had been destroyed in 4 minutes. The Zephyrian Empire's 3 centuries of conquest had ended in less time than it took to eat breakfast. Morrison opened a channel to the human colony. "This is Captain Morrison. The threat has been eliminated. You are safe." On the planet below, 50,000 people cheered. They had been saved by a miracle. They had been saved by the hidden strength of humanity. But this was just the beginning. Word of the battle would spread across the galaxy within hours. Every civilization would learn that humans were not the weak, helpless species they appeared to be. The galaxy was about to change forever. Admiral Vexter stood in the detention cell aboard the USS Defiant, staring at the walls that seemed to shimmer with strange energy. He had been the most feared military commander in the galaxy. Now he was a prisoner on a human ship, waiting to learn his fate. The door opened, and Captain Morrison entered. The human officer looked tired but satisfied. He had just won the most important battle in galactic history. "Admiral," Morrison said politely, "we need to talk." Vexter turned to face his captor. His 4 eyes were filled with confusion and defeat. "How?" he asked simply. "How did you do it?" "Our fleet was the strongest in the galaxy. Our ships were invincible." Morrison sat down across from the alien commander. "Your ships were built to fight enemies who followed the same rules you did. We don't follow those rules anymore, but the technology. Those weapons ... are impossible. They violate the laws of physics." "They violate the laws of physics as you understand them," Morrison corrected. "Earth has been developing new sciences. For decades, we've learned to manipulate quantum fields to bend space and time itself. Your empire never bothered to research these areas because you thought conquest was more important than knowledge." Vexter slumped in his chair. "You were watching us. All this time, you were watching and learning." "We were waiting," Morrison said. "Waiting for the right moment to reveal ourselves. You gave us that moment when you threatened innocent human lives. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the news of the battle was spreading like wildfire. Communication networks that had been silent for years suddenly came alive with reports, questions, and desperate requests for information. On the bridge of the USS Defiant, Communications Officer Danny Wright was fielding dozens of incoming messages. "Captain, we're getting transmissions from all over the galaxy. The Altarian Republic wants to establish diplomatic relations. The Centauri Federation is asking for military assistance against Zephyrian occupation forces. The Vegan Alliance is requesting an immediate meeting." Morrison nodded. "Record all messages. We'll respond when we get back to Earth." But the most important messages were coming from former Zephyrian territories. Worlds that had been conquered decades ago were declaring their independence. The mighty empire that had ruled through fear was crumbling as word of the fleet's destruction spread. "Captain," Commander Lisa Brooks reported, "we're detecting massive civil unrest in the Zephyrian home system. Their government is in chaos. Local governors are declaring independence from the central authority." Morrison wasn't surprised. The Zephyrian Empire had been built on the belief that their military was invincible. When that belief was shattered, everything else fell apart. On the planet below, the human colonists were celebrating. They had been saved from certain death by the arrival of a single ship. But they were also beginning to understand that their rescue meant something much bigger than just their own survival. Colony Administrator Janet Cole was speaking to the crowd that had gathered in the main square. "Today we learned something important about ourselves," she said. "We learned that we are not alone in the galaxy. We learned that Earth has not forgotten us. We learned that humanity is stronger than we ever imagined." The crowd cheered. Children, who had been terrified just hours ago, were now laughing and playing. Parents who had thought they would never see another day were holding their families close. But Janet knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy had changed today, and there was no going back. Back on the USS Defiant, Captain Morrison was meeting with his senior officers. They were discussing the implications of what they had just done. "Captain," Chief Engineer Corinne Ross said, Earth Command is requesting a full report. They want to know how the experimental systems performed." Morrison smiled. "Tell them the systems worked perfectly, better than we ever hoped. The quantum displacement technology had proven itself in combat. The phase shift drives had exceeded all expectations. The USS Defiant had shown that human engineering could create miracles." "Sir," Lieutenant Amy Foster added, "what about the other ships? The ones we disabled instead of destroying?" Morrison had made the decision to spare 17 Zephyrian vessels. He had used a modified quantum beam to shut down their engines and weapons without killing their crews. These ships now floated helplessly in space, their warriors humbled but alive. "We'll send them home," Morrison said, with a message. An hour later, Admiral Vexter found himself back on his own bridge. His ship's weapons were gone, permanently disabled by human technology. His engines barely had enough power to reach the nearest Zephyrian world. Captain Morrison appeared on his main screen one last time. "Admiral, you're free to go. But understand this, the age of conquest is over. Humanity claims no new territory. But we will defend every human life in the galaxy. If any Zephyrian force threatens innocent people again, we will respond with overwhelming force." Vexter nodded slowly. "I understand. But Captain, what about the rest of the galaxy? There are other empires, other threats. Will you protect everyone?" Morrison considered the question. "We'll protect those who can't protect themselves. And we'll stand with those who fight for freedom and peace." The communication ended, and the remaining Zephyrian ships began their long journey home. They carried with them the news that would reshape galactic politics forever. On Earth, Fleet Admiral Kate Phillips was studying the battle reports in her office. The data was almost unbelievable. One ship had destroyed an entire fleet in 4 minutes. The implications were staggering. "Admiral," her aide said, "the President wants to know how many more ships like the Defiant we can build." Phillips smiled. "Tell him we have 11 more already under construction, and we're designing even better ones." The truth was that Earth had been preparing for this moment for decades. The USS Defiant was just the first of a new generation of human warships. Ships that could travel faster than light, fight impossible battles, and protect human interests across the galaxy. But Earth's leaders were wise. They didn't want to become the new galactic empire. They had seen what happened to civilizations that relied on force alone. Instead, they would use their strength to create peace. Within days of the battle, diplomatic missions from dozens of worlds arrived at Earth. Species that had never spoken to humans before were suddenly eager to establish trade agreements and defense treaties. The Vegan Alliance, which had fought the Zephyrians for 50 years, offered to share their medical technology in exchange for human protection. The Centauri Federation proposed a mutual defense pact. Even the mysterious Andromedans, who rarely spoke to anyone, sent a message of congratulations. But the most important changes were happening in former Zephyrian territory. Worlds that had been enslaved for generations were declaring their freedom. The empire that had seemed eternal was breaking apart in a matter of weeks. Captain Morrison and the USS Defiant returned to Earth as heroes. They had done more than win a battle. They had announced humanity's arrival as a major galactic power. At the victory celebration, Morrison spoke to a crowd of millions. "Today marks the beginning of a new age," he said. "An age where bullies cannot threaten the innocent. An age where might does not make right. An age where humanity stands as a guardian of peace." The crowd cheered, but Morrison wasn't finished. "We didn't fight today to become conquerors. We fought to protect the innocent. We fought to show that there is a better way than fear and domination." In the months that followed, the galaxy settled into a new pattern. The Zephyrian Empire formally dissolved, its former territories becoming independent worlds or joining the growing Human Protection Alliance. Other aggressive species fought twice before starting wars, knowing that Earth's ships might appear. To stop them, pirates and raiders found their activities much more dangerous, as human patrols began appearing in previously lawless regions, but humans also kept their promise not to become conquerors. They established trading posts and diplomatic stations, but they didn't claim new territory. They offered protection to those who asked for it, but they didn't force their values on others. The USS Defiant continued its missions, now accompanied by sister ships of the same advanced design. Captain Morrison became the first human to hold the rank of Galactic Protector, a new position created by the Interworld Council. Admiral Vexter, meanwhile, spent his remaining years writing books about the battle that changed everything. He had learned that true strength didn't come from the size of your fleet or the power of your weapons. It came from fighting for something worth protecting. The galaxy had learned that humans were not the weak, primitive species they appeared to be. They were something far more dangerous. They were the species that would stand up to bullies, no matter how powerful those bullies might be. And in the end, that made all the difference. The age of galactic conquest was over. The age of human protection had begun. In the vast darkness of space, where countless civilizations looked up at the stars and wondered about their future, there was now hope. Hope that someone was watching. Hope that someone cared. Hope that the strong would protect the weak, instead of preying upon them. It had taken just 4 minutes to change the galaxy forever. 4 minutes to prove that humanity belonged among the stars. 4 minutes to show that Earth's children were ready to take their place as guardians of peace and freedom. The star